Hey everyone, Steven here. Today I'm doing my long format review for the ROG XG27UCDMG. I released the short version about a week ago. This one I'm going to be covering a lot of the things that I didn't in that short review, like the in-panel settings. I'm going to have more test results with this and just a lot more in-depth information for those that want it. With that being said though, I will have certain sections that are literally the exact same from that short version because I don't really need to record things a second time like the specs, for instance. With that being said though, we're going to get into the specs, in-panel settings, my test results. We're going to talk about consoles and what you can do with those, and then we will get into what I like, potentially don't like, and the gray area before wrapping the video up. I will say that is kind of the same as the short version, but there is a little bit that I have expanded on with those things as well. So with that being said, let's get into the specs. The ROG XG27UCDMG is a 27-inch 4K 4th Gen QD OLED panel monitor with a 240Hz refresh rate and a 0.03 millisecond gray-to-gray response time. This has a pixel density of 166 pixels per inch, with this being 4K at the 27 inches, so the text clarity here is extremely crisp and there is no text fringing from what I can see on this. This covers 99% of the DCI-P3 color space and 145% of the sRGB color space. This has a 1.5 1,000,000:1 contrast ratio, a peak brightness of 1000 nits, true 10-bit color, and a delta E of less than 2. For certifications, this is VESA HDR True Black 400, VESA Adaptive Sync 240Hz, AMD FreeSync Premium Pro, G-Sync compatibility, TÜV flicker free, and TÜV low blue light. For ports, this has two HDMI 2.1, one DP 1.4 with DSC, and a USB-C port that delivers 90 watts of power and can be used for a display input. You also have three USB 3.2 expansion ports and a headphone jack. For mechanical adjustments, this can raise and lower 120 millimeters. This can swivel to the left and right 45 degrees. This can tilt forwards 5 degrees and backwards 20 degrees, and this can pivot 90 degrees in either direction. Inside of the box, you get the monitor, stand, the ROG pouch with all of your cables. You get stickers with that, a microfiber cloth, and the warranty card, which this comes with a 3-year warranty like all Asus monitors. This is going to have the same base and arm as the other XG monitors, which this has a slot on the base to hold your phone if you want it to. And then on the top of the neck, you actually have a threading so you can attach a light, webcam, or microphone if you want to. This also comes with an adapter if you wanted to mount this to a monitor arm. This has a 100mm by 100mm VESA pattern for that. This is the first time I've actually mounted one of these monitors to a monitor arm, so you may see some footage where I'm using that, and it worked really well. And last, for the display surface type, this is anti-reflection from what ROG says. This is glossy, but it's not extremely glossy. It's kind of in between. I do like this. It fits very well in between matte and super glossy. You can see when I'm using the lights here, it does obviously reflect that, but it won't be as harsh as some of the other monitors that I've used in the past that are extremely glossy. And to give an example of that, this is the Gigabyte MO34WQC. This one is something that I would consider to be extremely glossy. It's almost like a mirror. It just reflects anything that is actually in the room. So this does not look like this. It's more, like I said, in between matte and super glossy. Shifting over now to the in-panel setting, for the menu button itself, this is the same as the other XG monitors. You will find this in the middle of the panel itself on the bottom. In the center, you're going to have your dial that you can use to choose various options, but it's also a quick access menu as well. On the right-hand side, you will have the power button, and then on the left-hand side, you have another quick access button. Clicking this in once brings up the main panel menu here. For the tabs on the first half, you have gaming, image, color, OLED care, and input select. Starting with gaming here, you're going to have a variable refresh rate. You do have extreme low motion blur. With this, you do need VRR off, and that actually just disables some other features. That's really going to be good for anybody that's on a console that does want to reduce any motion blur, where you're really only going to be using the 120 Hertz and not 240. After that, you have Game Plus, Game Visual, Shadow Boost, and then the ASUS Display Widget Center, which is essentially just the QR code that you can scan so you can get more information on this. I will showcase this here in a little bit so you can see what this does as well. Looking at the Game Plus tab though, you have FPS counter, crosshair, sniper, timer, stopwatch, and then the display alignment. For the game visual, this is where you can actually change the picture presets. Here, you're going to have scenery, racing, cinema, RTS/RPG, FPS, sRGB, MOBA, night vision, and user mode. After this, you have the shadow boost. This has off, 3 levels, and then the dynamic shadow boost, which will change this based off whatever's on screen. For the most part, this is going to be really good for darker games where you do need a boost to certain areas in that, but for the footage in this, I have left this off. Next, you have the image tab. Here you will find brightness, uniform brightness, which this will dim the monitor just a little bit so that it makes sure that all the brightness levels here are uniform, so you don't have any issues, for instance, when scaling a window that is completely white and dragging it from a small window to a large window. After that, you have contrast, OLED anti-flicker, which this does have the OLED anti-flicker 2.0, which ROG says that this will reduce flickering by up to 20% compared to previous generation panels. And then they show a graph here showcasing this without the OLED anti-flicker 2.0, and then when you're using it, and they can showcase there the luminance compensation that happens. Now on this monitor and the other ROG OLEDs that I've tested with just the anti-flicker 1.0, I haven't actually noticed a ton of flickering in general. The one place that I consistently may notice it is in a game menu, like when I'm dealing with Horizon Zero Dawn. I tested this with the anti-flicker on high and then with it off. It's pretty minimal across the board, so again, it's hard for me to even really notice it, and I don't consistently notice this popping up in other games in general, so it was hard for me to find a good game to actually even test this with, unfortunately. But that's good news because again, I really don't notice flickering across the board with this monitor. Next, we have the HDR presets, starting with gaming. It looks like there's some flickering in this footage that has to do with my camera. That's not something that I actually saw in person with this. But then you have cinema, consoles, and HDR 400 True Black. Now with my footage, I wasn't able to capture as much of the nuanced difference between these different modes. It really has more to do with the further off backgrounds, it seems like, but it's just hard to capture on my camera. The other settings that you will get here though are adjustable HDR and dynamic brightness boost. Dynamic brightness boost is only available in the console HDR. When you enable adjustable HDR though, you can adjust the brightness, uniform brightness, and contrast. It does give you a warning that this will affect the PQ curve though. Next, you have the aspect control. Here you have 16:9 and square. 16:9 you have full or pixel by pixel. If you're looking at the full, you have fill up and then the 24.5 inch simulation. This is what I want to showcase here. So once you enable this, you're going to get the black bars around the screen. The resolution here is a little bit different if you want to essentially kind of do 4K at 240 Hertz. If you do true 4K for the resolution, you can only go up to 120 Hertz. So let's go ahead and look at all the different resolutions here, the primary ones, and then the refresh rate that you can get with those. So on the top left, you have the native resolution, not quite 4K, but here you have 240 Hertz, 120, and 60. On the top right, you have the 4K resolution. This only has 120 and 100 Hertz. On the bottom left-hand side, you have 1440p. Here you have 240, 120, and 60 Hertz. And then on the bottom right-hand side, you have 1080p. Here you only have 240 Hertz. And last, for the image tab, you have blue light filter and vivid pixel. Next up, you have the color tab, which has display color space, color temperature, saturation, 6-axis saturation, and gamma. For the color space, you have a wide gamut, DCI-P3, and sRGB. Looking at the color temperature, I like how ROG does this. They give you the Kelvin unit here. So we're going from 4000K to 10,000K, or you can use the user mode, which this allows you to adjust the RGB colors, or you could just stick with one of the presets here. For most of the footage in this video, I've used 6500 and 7500K. For the 6-axis saturation, you can adjust the RGB CMY colors. And for gamma, you can go from 1.8 all the way up to 2.6. For OLED care features, you have Screen Saver, which you can enable screen dimming control, outer dimming control, and global dimming control. You have Pixel Cleaning, and then you have Pixel Cleaning Reminder, which you can set to off, 2, 4, and 8 hours. You have Screen Move, which just shifts the screen around a little bit to help avoid any static images on the screen. This is something that your eye won't visually notice. Then you have Auto Logo Brightness. Here you will find logo detection, taskbar detection, and then boundary detection. And then you have the Neo Proximity Sensor, which this will turn off the monitor if it doesn't sense that you're sitting in front of the monitor based off a certain distance, which you can do 60 centimeters, 90, 120, or a tailored mode. For the screen off portion here that you see, it's going to allow you to set this to 1, 5, or 10 minutes, meaning if you've been gone for 1, 5, or 10 minutes and it doesn't sense that you're in front of the monitor based off this distance, then it will turn off based off that time interval. Next up, you have Input Select. Here you have Auto Input Detection, and then you have DisplayPort, the 2 HDMI ports, and then you do have that USB Type-C port that you can use for a video input. Next, you have the picture-in-picture / picture-by-picture tab. Here you have the different modes, so you can actually choose where the picture-in-picture is going to go on the screen, or you can just go right into the picture-by-picture mode. Underneath that, you have the source, so you can choose between the HDMI, DP, or USB-C inputs. You have color setting, and then the picture-in-picture size. After that, you have the lighting effect tab. Here you can enable Aura Sync if you are using the software in order to actually sync up all of your lighting together. If you don't want to do that, you have the Aura RGB. Here you find off, rainbow, color cycle, static, breathing, and strobing. For static breathing and strobing, you do get to choose the color, and here you have RGB CMY for those options. After that, you have My Favorite. Here you have Shortcut and Customize Setting. This is where you can change the quick access menu items that are assigned to that radial dial. Here you'll find Game Plus, Game Visual, Brightness, Mute, Shadow Boost, Contrast, Input Select, HDR Setting, Blue Light Filter, Color Temperature, Volume, KVM, Pixel Cleaning, Customize Setting 1, and then Customize Setting 2. At the bottom in the middle, notice that you can change that quick access button as well that is on the left hand side. So on the right you have the power button, on the left you have that other quick access menu button. When you look at customize setting, this is just where you can save your total picture preset adjustments that you've made to 2 different slots for an easy way to switch between these two really quick. Last, we have system setup. Here you will find language, sound, USB setup, power indicator, power key lock, power setting, OSD setup, DisplayPort stream, DSC support, ASUS power sync, information, and all reset. For the USB setup, you have the KVM switch options. Here for KVM, you have auto KVM detect. And then when you're looking at USB-C, DisplayPort, HDMI, you're just assigning what it's going to utilize for the KVM switch if you're using that particular input. For Type-C bandwidth, you have 2.0 or 3.2, and then for USB hub, it's basically just going to ask if you want this to charge your devices if the monitor is in standby mode. Next, I want to look at the various options that you have when it comes to resolution and the refresh rate. Starting in the top left-hand corner, this is going to be 4K without DSC on. Here, 120, 100, 97, and 60 hertz for that. So you do not have display stream compression turned on. When you look at the right top hand corner here, you're going to find 4K with DSC on. Here you get 240, 120, 100, 97, and 60 hertz. On the bottom left hand side, you're going to have 1440p with DSC on. Here you have 240, 120, 160. If you turn DSC off, you only get 120, 160. If you actually scroll to the top, because right now I'm on the PC tab portion in the NVIDIA control panel, if you go up, it actually has some different presets. You can actually get a little bit more in terms of options when it comes to the refresh rate, more specifically with 1080p, which is going to be on the bottom right hand side. So when we're looking at that with DSC on, you have the 240 hertz. If you turn that off, you get 120, 160 if you're dealing with those lower PC presets for the resolution. If you go to the top and you're going to say, hey, we're going to do 1080p, this is the resolution, you actually have more options when it comes to the refresh rate. There you're going to get the 120, 100, you'll get 60, but you also get like 59, 50, 24, etc. So you just get more options if you go that route. I think the big takeaway here for most people is going to be, if you do not have DSC on, you will not get 4K 240 hertz. You'll only get 120 hertz, so you will want to leave that on. In terms of, are you going to notice a visual difference? I think for most people, you're not going to notice a difference, but if you did want uncompressed 4K 240 hertz, then you're going to want to go with the PG27UCDM, because that will have the DP 2.1 port. Next, let's get into the ASUS Display Widget Center app. Here for the tabs, we have Game Visual, Game Plus, OLED Care, Multi-Screen, Hotkey, App Tweaker, and System Settings. For the Game Visual, you will find all of the same picture presets that you have in the panel. You also have AI Visual. This is in beta. And with this, essentially whatever it senses as on screen, or at least the main portion of the screen, it will shift that picture preset to match what it thinks is on screen. So right now we have the AI visual window up. You don't have to have this up if you don't want it, but right now it's saying, hey, there's a 50% chance that this is actually some type of video game. And so with this, I'm going to click into that mode. And here it would show you the percentages, office mode, or FPS. You can click off of these though. If you don't want these and you really want to switch just between a couple of them, you just select those ones. And then again, if that thing is on screen, it will change over to that picture preset. If we look at the regular picture presets, here for image, you're going to have brightness, contrast. We don't have any variable overdrive because it's an OLED. Shadow boost, if you want to actually change that. And then we're not going to have the ASUS Smart Contrast Ratio, just because again, it's an OLED, so you don't have that. For color, we have saturation, hue, and then the color temperature here. You're not going to see this in this recording, but if I filmed it, you would see every time I click on one of these, it does shift over to that particular picture preset. For Game Plus, here we will find crosshair, timer, FPS counter, and then display alignment. Clicking on any of these tabs, underneath you will see the corresponding adjustments that you can make for that. OLED Care, all of the adjustments that you can make in the panel, you can make them right here, and then you can apply those. So a lot of options you can turn on or off. You can even run the pixel cleaning from this if you wanted to as well. Then we have multi-screen, multi-frame, picture-in-picture / picture-by-picture, and then the KVM. And here, the options that you have available to you and that you would actually shift over if you wanted to enable this, right? We could turn this on right now, switch over to this, or utilize that KVM switch as well. Hotkeys, if you want to create any hotkeys for this, as long as the application is running, you can just use that hotkey and then enable or disable certain features or adjust certain features as well. App Tweaker. So with this, if you didn't want to mess with the AI visual, but you still wanted it so that if you pull up a particular program, a picture preset gets applied, this is where you can do that. So for Adobe Acrobat, I have it set to user, but I can add another application if I wanted to this. Let's just say Steam, right? It's going to pull up FPS. And then if I didn't want that, I could simply delete it. So every time Steam pulls up, it's going to click over to the FPS preset. After that, we have system settings. That has to do a lot with just the application itself. If I'm going to display HDR, what color the app is going to be, and then if I have any power settings that I want to adjust. So for instance, put this into the power savings mode. User center, don't need to mess with that. Application settings, and then your user manual. So that is going to wrap it up for the Asus Display Widget Center app. Shifting over now to my test results, starting with the SpiderX color calibration tool. Here, just adding more information to what ROG is showcasing with their specs. They're talking about color space. Here, I'm testing for color gamut. I will talk about the differences here in a second, but starting on the far left-hand side, we have the wide gamut here. This, in terms of coverage, is 100% of the sRGB color gamut, 82% of the Adobe RGB, 90% of the DCI-P3, and then 79% of the NTSC. Shifting over to the DCI-P3, here we have 100% coverage of the sRGB color gamut, 79% of the Adobe RGB, 87% of the DCI-P3, and then 77% of the NTSC. So you can see subtle differences between wide gamut and DCI-P3, and then sRGB. And this has been for all of the monitors that I've tested. When they have an sRGB mode, you usually see a hit in terms of color gamut. Here, 87% coverage of the sRGB color gamut, 64% of the Adobe RGB, 64% of the DCI-P3, and then 60% of the NTSC. For all of the footage in this video, I'm using the wide color gamut color space. The DCI-P3 looks pretty close. You do see a subtle hit in terms of the vibrancy on screen, and then there is a pretty stark difference between wide gamut and DCI-P3 to the sRGB. So for most gamers, wide gamut DCI-P3 is going to be the best option. For anybody that's needing to do work in an application where you need to work within that sRGB color space, you do have that option there. And just to clarify the differences between color gamut, space, and saturation, because you see a lot of different companies use different metrics in terms of their technical specifications when they're talking about color. Some say color gamut, some say color space. Look at some other monitors, they actually talk about color saturation. What does all of this mean? Here we have a little bit of a breakdown. For color gamut, it's the range of colors that a system can display, reproduce, or capture. It's a 2D representation of the range of colors in a color space and can be thought of as the borders of that space. Color space, a mathematical model that defines how colors are represented in terms of numbers. Each color space has a defined gamut, which refers to the specific range of colors it can represent. So hopefully this provides a little bit more context for the numbers that you see in regards to color gamut, space, and saturation that you find monitors showcase with their technical specifications, because a lot of them are using different ones, so I know it can be confusing. Again, here I'm just adding information because ROG is talking about color space in regards to this monitor. I was showcasing color gamut. Next is the test result from the on-screen response time testing tool that I use. Keep in mind, this is going to be different than the testing tool that ROG uses. This is only to add to their information. Also keep in mind that they're looking at gray to gray, where here I'm not only looking at gray to gray, but I'm looking at the full transition where you're going from black to white or black to white to black here. So with this, the average complete time, 1.09 milliseconds. When we're looking at this, this is color graded. Green means very good. If you look at like a orange yellowish color, that's going to be decent, and then red obviously is not good. Here, this thing is incredibly fast. If you're looking at the perceived response time, I just said the average complete time. If we're looking at the 02550, that black, white, black transition, 1.8 milliseconds, incredibly fast. Best here was 0.7, worst was 1. When we look at the RGB overshoot, you're seeing a couple numbers on there, but really you're not going to have any inverse ghosting when it comes to this monitor. And then the visual response rating, it is taking the perceived response time, the RGB overshoot, taking those and averaging those out and then grading them. This essentially gets a 95.8, a 96. It is the most uniform visual response rating I've seen out of any of the tests that I've run on these monitors. Very, very good with this. And if you're looking at a UFO test, this is extremely clean. You can pause this video at any point and you will see that there's no ghosting. What you're seeing is a transitionary frame. Now here I'm dealing with the limitations of my camera, of the lens, how I'm recording this, YouTube in terms of what they can actually display. I'm not using a trail pursuit camera, but just visually with my eye when I look at this, I'm not seeing any ghosting, which is awesome, but that's going to be something that is across the board for OLEDs. You just really don't get any ghosting because of the really fast pixel response time and overall response time. Next, I want to showcase what you can do with consoles. This is going to cover everything across the board. So 4K, 1440p, 1080p, you're going to get variable refresh rate. You have HDR. When you're looking at 4K and 1080p, you do get those in between refresh rates like 24 and 50 hertz if you wanted to use those. And then in terms of the auto low latency mode, you do have the ability to enable that as well. Now this is for the PlayStation 5. For the Xbox Series X, you're going to find all of these same setting options. You can do the 4K, 120, 60, you can do 1440p, 1080p, all of that. The only difference is this is showcasing that you do not have support for Dolby Vision, which is a proprietary type of HDR calibration. So you do not have access to that, but you have all the other settings, including the auto low latency mode and variable refresh rate. So now that I've covered the specs, my test results, what you can do with consoles, let's get into what I like about this monitor, starting with something that I actually haven't talked about yet, which is the price. This is coming in at $899. Looking at the 3rd gen 240 hertz 32 inch 4K monitors that we got last year that were coming in at $1,300, this thing is a home run. I'm not saying that it's not expensive, but I know a lot of people were asking for the 27 inch version of that monitor. Here we're getting the 4th gen OLED panel, not 3rd. They didn't just repackage it there. And you're getting a lot of the new features with OLED care on top of all the customization that you get in the panel menu. You also have the display widget app, which offers a ton of customization that you can just do right from your desktop. You don't actually have to go into the panel menu. To me, this is an S-tier monitor. They've just brought so much together with this that a lot of people were asking for. You still have the option. You can go look at the 32-inch versions of these. Those have come down in price if you do want the larger size. But I think the draw here is, one, I think a lot of people do like the 27-inch size just across the board. But the higher pixel density that you will find with this monitor compared to the 32-inch version. I'm a big fan of 32-inch monitors. Using this for a while now, the pixel density is really drawing me more towards this as one of my favorite monitors, period, because everything is so crisp. Going from 32 down to 27, still at 4K, you do notice the visual difference in just overall clarity, not just with text, like I mentioned earlier, but also in game. It just looks really, really nice. You can tell the difference in the overall pixel density compared between the two. I wasn't thinking it was going to be that big of a difference, but it is very noticeable with this. And I think part of that is because this is the OLED panel. The colors here are popping, both in SDR and in HDR, just across the board. Visually, it looks amazing. Performance-wise, it's amazing. And then you have so much customization that you can do with this thing. And again, the fact that they brought this in at under $1,000 to me is very impressive, while still providing that 3-year warranty. I've seen some other ones where they try to cut out the warranty to bring down the cost, and then everybody freaks out because they're like, if this thing breaks, it's not going to be worth it to send it back to you and pay all this money to have you fix it. The cost difference there ultimately is not worth it. So I like the fact that, again, we get the very solid price point here, and still we're keeping that 3-year warranty. Now, I think some people may initially look at this, they look at the price, and they're going to say that it's too expensive because they're going to look at what's out there on the market, and they're going to make comparisons to some of the models that came out last year, and they're going to say, well, this one is either the same cost or potentially cheaper, and so that's going to be the better deal. Keep in mind, those are going to be 2nd or 3rd gen OLED panels. They may not have the same OLED care features, and they're 1440p. They're not 4K. You have some that were 1440p 360 hertz. So if you need a higher refresh rate, that may be a draw, but I think 4K 240 hertz is such a good sweet spot. Another thing that I really like here is the HDR across the board. I like the fact that you can customize this a good amount. Some monitors don't really allow you to customize the HDR at all in terms of brightness and contrast. You can do that here. The different modes, they're subtle in terms of the difference, but again, you can change certain things with that to kind of tailor it more towards the visual aesthetic that you're going for. And OLEDs, in terms of the infinite black levels just really make HDR content pop on this. So across the board, I'm really impressed with the HDR here. I've seen some other monitors where they launch and it's not really calibrated well for the HDR, so it doesn't look good and people don't use it, and then it's months down the road and then they finally do a firmware update and then they get it looking good and then people may come back. But I think sometimes that may put a sour taste in some people's mouth, meaning they may not actually come back to it just because they're so put off by the HDR experience and they don't want to spend a ton of time trying to calibrate HDR so that it looks good for them. Of course, that doesn't apply to everybody. Some people are more willing to spend the time to calibrate HDR, and I personally don't mind it, but I know that for an overall experience, it is nicer when it is just more plug and play. You don't have to spend any time, and if you do, maybe a little bit of time calibrating HDR to your liking, and that's really what you get here. It's just really solid HDR right out of the box. And for consoles, I think this is going to be great for anybody that does PC gaming as well as console gaming, because again, you are covered with all of the options available to you for consoles. Now, this being 240 hertz, I know some people are like, why do I need that? The consoles are only going to be able to do 120 hertz, but here you also do get the extreme low motion blur, and you do have black frame insertion support if you wanted to use that as well. So if you're worried about motion clarity, there are options with this to even make that look smoother at 120 hertz with consoles. I also like the options that you have with the aspect control. A lot of monitors offer some type of control or change that you can do to the aspect ratio. What I like here is the 24.5 inch simulation that you can do where you're still going to hit the 240 hertz. So I like not only the fact that you do have that control within the panel itself, but on top of that, you still are hitting 240 hertz. You're not going to lose that. For some people, it may be like, hey, certain games, I do want the smaller size. Well, you're still going to get the high resolution and also the high refresh rate with that. And then some of the extras here, I really like the fact that they put in the 3 extra USB ports. I'm always looking for extra USB ports when it comes to my monitor. I like the fact that with the USB-C, you do have the 90 watts. So you can charge a handheld, your laptop, your phone with this, and then also use that as a display input. So if you wanted to connect any of those items, you could still display that to the monitor. And of course, we get the KVM switch functionality here, which I always appreciate. Any monitor that has that, I just really like that function. I've become so accustomed to having it with my main monitors now. It's always hard to go back to one that doesn't allow for that because it just makes everything so seamless when you're transitioning between a PC, a laptop, a handheld, your console, whatever, and you can just keep your peripherals connected to the monitor so you're not constantly needing to trade out cables or swap out your USB dongles. So here I think ROG is just hitting home run after home run when it comes to this monitor, which brings us to the negatives or the things that I don't like. And I'm actually happy to report I don't have anything. There is no standout negative that I've found with this monitor. It's delivering across the board. So if there were issues with performance or the color calibration or the options in the panel menu or how it performed with consoles, SDR performance versus HDR, the HDR options that you get there, we're looking at OLED care, everything here just delivers. I haven't found anything to me that was just like, man, that is a problem. This is something that I wish they would fix or address or anything like that. It just delivered across the board. In terms of the gray area, I actually had a hard time thinking of gray area things, and I only came up with one thing. And here, the gray area things are things that you may or may not care about, and the only thing I was able to come up with was the stand. And that's in terms of aesthetics, not in terms of performance. This thing performs very well. The XG series all have the same base and arm, and I think for some people, maybe aesthetically, they may not like the look because it is a wider base. They do that so that you can put your phone in that slot in the front if you wanted to. I do like the PG series stand better. I think aesthetically it just looks nicer. But if you don't like the stand with this, you can always VESA mount this, and ROG makes a monitor arm that would pair very well with this thing. And so that's actually it for the gray area things. Some people may not aesthetically like the base and the arm. That's it. So again, I think ROG has delivered big time when it comes to this monitor. I'm going to say for me, this is definitely fighting for that top spot in terms of my favorite monitor to date that I've reviewed. And the last thing I want to do here is compare the XG27UCDMG to the PG27UCDM. So the PG is going to be the Swift portion of the brand. The XG is going to be the Strix. With this, you have these three differences. The PG version has the DP 2.1 versus the XG having the 1.4, and then the PG has USB 3.1 on it versus the 3.0 that you find on the XG, and then you have the price. So the PG version is going to be roughly $1,200, where this monitor, the XG version, is going to be roughly $900. One small note with that though is I am seeing on Best Buy's website that this has gone up a little bit in price to $979. Now I don't know if that's in response to the tariffs, if it's just a supply and demand issue currently, if that price is going to come back down. If I find out anything, I will put that in the description of this video. But I think across the board, we're probably going to see just pricing volatility for a while with this notion of tariffs and everything that's going on right now. And so fingers crossed, we don't really see these massive fluctuations, but unfortunately I do think that is going to be the case. And again, I don't know if that is what's going on here, but the price is a little bit more, but it's still going to be cheaper than the PG version. So unless you need uncompressed 4K 240 Hertz and you want the newer USB version, I say just go ahead and stick with the XG version here and save yourself some money. And that's going to wrap it up for the long format review of the XG27UCDMG. Hopefully I was able to provide just more information for everybody that did want the more in-depth information in regards to this monitor and this panel here. But if there's anything that I didn't cover, let me know in the comment section. I will make sure to answer that for you there. I will also have a link for this in the description if you want to pick it up. So if you liked the video, hit the like button for me as it helps the channel out. If you want to continue to follow along with all my content, hit the subscribe button for me. And as always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.